Before I open the hearing for the Barnstable Conservation Commission, I would like to ask Angela to do a roll call for the quorum purpose.
Abadili.
Present.
DeMello.
Present.
Hearn.
Present.
Kashulik.
Present.
Lee.
Present.
Sampu.
Present.
Tangney present. Administrator Ed Hoops.
Present.
Staff member Kim Kavanaugh.
Present.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Acting under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and or Chapter 237 of the Code of Town of Barnstable, the Barnstable Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, May the 26th, 2026 at 6:30 p.m. for the applications of Terry L. Zicos, trustee, and Terry Zico Trust. This hearing is being recorded and broadcast on the Town of Barnstable's Government Access Channel. The plans and applications are on file and may be reviewed by scheduling appointments by sending an email request to @hoops at 230 South Street, Hyannis. In accordance with the Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, please let the chair know if anyone is recording this hearing. Hearing none. Tonight's hearing agenda is posted on the town's website. On the agenda, next to each application is the amount owed to the Town of Barnstable for the cost of advertisement. Please send your checks to the Conservation Division at 230 South Street before the hearing. Remote participation. The Conservation Commission's public hearing will be held by remote participation as a result of an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed by the Governor on March 28, 2025, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law. Remote public access to this hearing shall be provided in the following manner. 1. The hearing will be televised via Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definition Channel 1072. It may also be accessed via Town of Barnstable's Government Access Channel. 2. The real-time public comment can be addressed to the Conservation Commission utilizing the Zoom link 810-1873-9135 or use the toll-free phone number 888-475-4499 as shown on the agenda. Third, the public can also email the comments to edwin.hoops@barnstable.gov at least 8 hours prior to the hearing. Tonight, we don't have any RDA and we only have one NOI. Terry R. Seacos, trustee, the Terry Seacos Trust, proposed invasive species removal and restoration with native planting at 129 Main Street, Austinville, as shown on the Census Map 165 parcel 078. Before I open, I just want to recognize Rob for that.
Yes, I'll be recusing myself from this.
Thank you, Rob. John?
Good evening, John O'Day from Sullivan Engineering Consulting, representing the applicants. I will pull up our plans for you. This property is located at 129 Main Street in Austerville on the Centerville River. We've been before you a handful of times over the last couple of years to rebuild the pier, to replace the walls around the boathouse, and most recently got a little bulkhead just seaward of the boathouse approved, which has not been constructed. Walls around the boathouse, the pier has been built for a couple of years. Walls around the boathouse are just recently being completed. And in doing all this work, it has the applicants and ourselves taking a closer look at the bank. There is heavily invaded with invasives, heavily overrun with invasives. In doing the work around the boathouse, we've kind of tackled about a third of the embankment, but we think that now's the right time to look at the property in its entirety. So the invasives that we're looking at on this coastal bank, we have bittersweet, English ivy, honeysuckle, privet, multiflora rose, and Japanese pokeweed. The most heavily invaded is kind of the middle third of the property. The area more to the west will be more of a spot treatment, hand cutting, hand pulling, and there's some decent existing native vegetation that can remain in there. But this center third will be a more extensive restoration area. The invasives would be treated mostly by a drip swab method. The brush would be cut and removed from the site. The root systems would be allowed to remain. It is a steep embankment, so we think that as much as possible that those could be left in place will help to stabilize the bank. And then the area would be restored with a good mix of new native vegetation. I think with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you have. I think I also have Nick Snowden from DeMello Brothers Landscaping, who might be here and available to jump in to help answer any questions that I cannot.
I did not see Nick. Oh, yes, Nick Snowden, yes. Question for the commissioner. Any questions?
Yes.
John?
Just quickly, I did see a monitoring plan in there, right, John?
Yes, I believe that is outlined in the management plan and would be anticipated as a condition regardless.
Okay, I thought so. Thank you.
Any other question from the commissioner? Seeing none. Channel 18, any public comment on this one?
None.
None. So, John or Nick, do you need or do you want to have that invasive management control as part of the order of conditions?
I think that it would be beneficial for there to be an ongoing, like I said, we anticipate the monitoring maintenance for 3 years, but I think it would be beneficial to have an ongoing option for an ongoing condition through certificate of compliance to continue to monitor and maintain.
And I think the Miller Brothers are licensed applicator, right? For
that is true.
chemical. Yes. And the other thing I'm thinking of is if we approve this, the Miller Brothers would be the invasive management contractor. If there is any change in terms of the contract, that we need a written notification for review and approval. Is that fair?
Understood and fair.
Can I ask a question before we?
Yep.
When we have an invasive species, I want to call it in perpetuity clause, meaning you can do it after the 3 years. How does that work? I don't understand that. What I'm wondering is, here they're going to be clearing out the vegetation appropriately, and they could continue to do that. But then what about the planting? Are they under some obligation to plant new stuff? Might there be, and I'm not talking about this project in particular, but the way we do that, might there be no future planting? And in some projects like this one, I don't know, if you didn't have a plan for planting after you used whatever herbicides you were using, you might end up having a bank failure. So how do we deal with 6 or 10 years down the line, how this invasive management control?
So my expectation would be that any ongoing condition would be in consultation with staff and with a very specific pre-request and probably with a follow-up monitoring of whatever's done. My general understanding of maintenance is it's maintaining some portion of a project that's been implemented. So we do see some sites where it's, acres and acres and we kind of do it as a master plan and they don't always get to it all. And I don't think that is intended to say, hey, in 5 years, I might start phase 3 that I never did. I think that the maintenance is maintaining areas that they implemented and being able to continue those. And I think that and again, sort of my expectation of maintenance is in year 5, something pops up and someone needs to do a little bit of handwork, that's something that can be coordinated with staff. If somebody ignores the site for 20 years and wants to start over, that could
That's a different
be treated as a different project.
But when we provide a permit, and the permit, maybe this is a question for Ed Hoops, when we provide a clause that says you can go into the future doing things after the 3 years, does the permit say that they would in the future, with that year 5 to 9 or whatever, it would be done in consultation with the staff?
I mean, that's always been assumed that's how they're going to have to do it. I mean, that would be the only way you could do that.
right.
Through having a consultation with the staff. So
In consultation and subject to their approval, or I don't have a recent example of what the verbiage is, but I think it's.
I don't know what the verbiage is either. I was just wondering and hoping there was some clause that didn't mean now you can just continue to use the pesticide, the herbicide, and no plantings, and something might go wrong. I don't know.
If they have some planting already going in there as permitted planting stuff, and then they managed to remove some of the invasive control, that they still have to keep the existing approved plant perpetuity in there and keep it going. And then if there's a new plant or something, then they need to consult with the staff.
Yeah. Okay.
It's also taken up in the certificate of compliance when they come back, Bill.
Right.
Okay. Thanks.
And then an annual report for 3 years. Could I have a motion to approve this project as submitted with those conditions I just mentioned?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Kashulik,
Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
Tangney, aye. That's unanimous. 6. It's approved.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a nice night.
Nick. Now we have 2 continuance. As I assume, Arlene, we're doing one by one, right?
Yes, I'm here with Brian Wall.
Yeah.
And if it's all right with you, I think Brian's going to do a few remarks at the beginning.
Okay, let me read the advertisement first. The first one is Steve Madden to reconstruct and extend existing permanent pier, replace ram and float, relocate the kayak rack, and provide electric and water services at 95 Eel River Road, Osterville, as shown in Assessors Map 116, Parcel 121. This is a continuance from April the 28th, May 19th, and the quorum is every commissioner tonight. And John also watched the tape and joined us through the Mullen rule. So I'll let Brian make some remark, and then Arlene, and then I'll come back and add some more information to the file first. Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the commission. Actually, what I want to talk about is maybe making a suggestion about procedure. When we were before the commission last time in April, Mr. Sampu was, I think he was traveling. He had a family matter, and he had some connectivity problems and was difficult to hear him. And since then, he has submitted a number of case laws, some past cases involving the commission, as well as some additional information. And since this is a continued hearing, it seems appropriate that maybe Mr. Sampu should pick up where he left off, because it was kind of his commentary, and then maybe we could pick up from there, if that would be okay, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine. I can let Peter said. And one of the things that I want to read into the record is all the articles and informations that Commissioner Sampu has submitted as part of the documentation as a listing so that everybody's clear what is included in that file. So,
sure, I think that's a good idea.
Pete?
So, yeah, I'd actually just like to mention that Mr. Wall, the problem was I heard everything as I was traveling back from Boston, but I didn't have my papers and things with me. It was sort of an emergency. I'm power of attorney for my cousin who had a major stroke, and she had to be up there, and it took much longer, and we got stuck in traffic. So the reason why I didn't speak is I didn't have much of my information with me. I can start with information, but I do know that Ms. Wilson has added stuff as well. The 108 pages of technical documents, which I've reviewed all of them as well, and I'm interested in hearing her input of information there in support of this dock and then the Randon Pier. So I guess, Tom, it's up to you if you want me to start or if we'll hear from the applicant's agent first.
Let's Ali go first, and then you can make additional comment, and then I can read those articles and information that you submitted and Arlene submitted as part of the documentations, and then we can go through with the commissioner in terms of any other questions.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, just for the record, I believe that the information sent by Commissioner Sampu was also copied to the applicant's representative. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so.
Through your staff, yeah. Even Pete's dog doesn't like me. Ed was kind enough to forward some of the stuff. Some we've just picked off the website. Pete did not forward things to me directly, nor did I forward anything to him directly.
No.
Everything to staff.
Yeah.
Okay, as long as, out of fairness, everybody was notified. That's all. I just want to make sure it sounds like it was well covered.
Yeah, so all the material has to go through staff and disseminate into the applicant and the commissioner, so that everybody has the same information. So
that's great. Thank you, sir.
Yep, Arlene.
Sure. Arlene Wilson, AM Wilson Associates, here with Attorney Brian Wall for the applicants, the Maddens. Just quickly to recap, the Madden site at 95 Eel River Road has let me share my screen. That'll make things easier.
Yes.
I hope. Okay, these are out of order, but here's the existing pier, colored in brown. So they have an existing permanent pier with a ramp and float, which extends about 69 feet beyond mean low water. Mean low water is colored in blue on this plan. It has 10-inch diameter piles set in bents that are 8 feet apart. The proposed pier, shown here in brown, would have bents averaging something over 14 feet on center and extend to 100 feet beyond mean low, including the ramp and pier. Because the increased fencing, the piles only take up an additional 3.32 square feet of bottom area beyond what the existing pier does. Because we're proposing a 3 by 26 foot ramp and an 8 by 25 foot float, the fixed pier and walkway only needs to be 14 feet longer than the current fixed pier. So the section of the structure that will be in the water in the off season extends 54 feet beyond mean low versus the 40 feet that's there now. To answer some of the questions that came up at the last session of the hearing, the end of the float will be about 76 feet from the closest mooring, which is the one to the northwest. There's another mooring off the edge of this plan to the west that will be about 108 feet from the end of the float. The intention is to be able to berth a small, shallow draft motorboat at the site, since in spite of the town shellfish habitat ranking, the site-specific shellfish studies here that have been done over a period of 14 years show very low population densities and little to no recruitment. That is, nothing native is growing at the site. And the commission recently in the Miller project at 640 Pompanesett Road in Cotuit, and previous to that at other sites apparently, including Markowitz, Keeley, and Foster, have allowed applicants to have simply a 12-inch freeboard under a boat, even though the areas are high-ranking shellfish areas based on town mapping. We would like it noted that we've requested the video of the Miller hearing from 5/19/26 to be included in the file record for Madden. I understand there's some problem transposing the video to the microfiche, but it could be done simply by putting the video on a thumb drive and putting the thumb drive in the record, or by including verbatim minutes. We believe that invasive tunnicates should not be an issue here. Most importantly, the tunnicate species which grow on piles are different from the ones that form mats along the bottom. It's those mat-forming species that are a problem for shellfish. They smother the shellfish because they cover them. Our two experts for site-specific shellfish studies at this site looked specifically for tunnicates on the bottom, on the existing Madden Pier, and on the bracketing piers to the north and the south, and found no tunnicates at all in the system. The Department of Marine Fisheries comment letter has come in. It did not recommend against the project. They did recommend sort of standard conditions on float separation to the bottom and construction equipment, including not gassing up at the site and not letting the barge sit on the bottom. Those are almost always taken care of with conditions in an order. They did see nearby winter flounder and andromous fish run habitat, but interestingly, they didn't recommend time of year restrictions. It may be because the habitat is far enough away from where the pier work would be done. If the commission felt it necessary, we'd be happy to accept time of year conditions for those species in any event. Ms. Lewis, the town shellfish biologist, noted that she gives lessons in shellfishing on the Madden property, for which she has never sought permission. I suspect that should she ask, something could be worked out, but she hasn't asked. And to the low water line, it is still private property. Mr. Sampu added some documents in the file which we presume are intended to express a concern for longshore rod fishing access. The existing pier already would present an encumbrance if it didn't comply with the Chapter 91 regulations as enforced to comply with the colonial ordinances for access. In the fact that it does provide sufficient access required by those ordinances is evidenced by the issuance of a Chapter 91 license for the existing pier, since the proposed pier would be essentially the same in horizontal and vertical location. One would assume that the Department of Waterways, Division of Waterways, would again issue a Chapter 91 license for a structure like this, indicating compliance with the requirement for longshore access for fishing and shellfishing. And furthermore, the commission issued an order of conditions for the existing pier. One would assume that recreation, having been a protectable interest in the ordinance at the time that order of conditions was issued, that the commission also felt that access was sufficient both for fisheries purposes and for recreational purposes. Commissioner Sampu also introduced the DEP small dock guidance and a paper on the impacts of small docks by Logan and others into the record. As noted in our supplemental submission of May 21st, we believe our design meets all the relevant recommendations applicable to sites such as this, as recommended in those documents. And finally, Ms. Lewis expressed a concern that the pier could result in a change of closure status for the area, both because the GIS marker for the area uses the end of the existing pier, and because it would add boats. We provided in the appendix to our supplement Department of Marine Fisheries mooring policy, and that information cites the methodology they use for imposing closures. It's based on both the number of boats capable of containing sanitary facilities. If the commission, and we hope you will, allow us to have freeboard under a boat of 12 inches here, a boat that can meet that requirement at this dock is still going to be very small, and too small to allow it to have an onboard toilet. And so we don't believe that lengthening this pier and having a motorboat on it will have any impact at all on the closure status. As to the concern for losing the marker for the shellfish area, we are happy to provide a marker at the location of the end of the existing pier so that it will still be possible to see where the current shellfish area is, and there won't need to be a change to that. Finally, and let's see if I can bring these up. We'd like to note that the town's 2020 aerial of the area shows that almost every lot that could contain a pier already has a pier. That's from the area of the Bridge Street landing along the South Bay waterfront, and then all the way to the end of Eel River. Most of these piers have existed for some time. They almost all have motorboats associated with them because the vast majority of them were permitted prior to the Conservation Commission's current regulations. It does not appear that most of them meet the 30-inch rule that would be imposed if they asked for permitting now. And yet, in spite of that, the town shellfish map rankings have done nothing but increase over time. So this is the 2021 map, and I know it's hard to read, but the commission should have the originals of these in their records. And at the time this map was approved, the area in which the Madden property occurs was ranked as a 7. In 2011, the maps were updated. The area was now ranked as a 10. And in the 2020 map, which has never been adopted, it continues to be a 10. The other interesting thing is that over the time of these mappings, the area of the Madden and Randon properties is not the only area where the shellfish ranking has increased. There are a number of other areas where the ranking has been increased over time. And that's in spite of the numbers of piers and boats and the increase in use in the adjacent mooring area. So it seems that the conditions here would also lend themselves, much as the condition at the Miller property on Pompanesett Road did, to the commission allowing a lesser amount of freeboard under a boat than the 30 inches, which might be required if you only looked at the habitat ranking map. In the Miller property, the main reason that I believe, because I was sitting in on that hearing, that you allowed the relaxation of that rule is that they had one current shellfish study which showed much less significant population density of shellfish than would be indicated by the shellfish ranking map. Here, we not only have one study, we have 4 studies that extend over a period of 14 years that all show essentially the same thing. So I'd be happy to answer questions that the commission might have.
Arlene, did you mention that you submit a supplemental for the GPS for the mooring information?
Yes, I believe I did. So we've submitted a multi-page report.
I only saw one for 117 Eel River Road.
No, we did for both projects. So there is a supplement for 95 Eel River Road as well. It uses the same appendix as for 117.
Okay. Let me find it. Pete, you want to follow up on this?
Yes, please. And I will be essentially reiterating my comments for the Randon Pier. I'd like to start by just giving the record that I have a PhD in biological oceanography. I spent 13 years down the Chesapeake Bay, a big estuary, doing nearshore coastal research. And I was able to read even Ms. Wilson, that very difficult, it comes up later in my analysis, very difficult paper that you had that came out of the University of New Hampshire. I can't remember it'll come up. I've got it written down. Okay, so for the Madden Pier, the applicant's agents have attempted to address several concerns that have led to Barnstable's Conservation Commission denial of dock projects in the past. And I will argue that their effort to justify these dock extensions have not convinced me. Until recently, our denials have been upheld by our state's judicial system. Reference cases of Thomas Ryan, Superior Court Civil Action 2016-00012, Henry Comstock, Superior Court Department 03-222, and Francis Keeley, Superior Court Civil Action 03-223. The Conservation Commission is required to evaluate, to weigh the evidence presented on a case-by-case basis. Do these two projects, again, this is going to be exact same wording for the Madden, so bear with me as I have written this. Do these two projects, these dock extensions, negatively impact the nearshore environment, the functionality of coastal ecosystems, and or detract from the public's right to commercially and or recreationally use the water sheet and underlying bottom below the mean high tide mark? And if they do, then we, the Conservation Commission, are obligated by our town's bylaw and or the Wetlands Protection Act to deny such projects. So how is it that our Town of Barnstable Conservation Commission approves docks, floats, piers, and their associated boats, hereafter lump all three into the collective term docks, in our town's waters, given that there is abundance of evidence in scientific peer-reviewed publications and from federal and state agency reviews that docks negatively impact nearshore environments? See Logan et al. 2021, a review of habitat impacts from residential docks and the recommended best management practices with an emphasis on the northeastern United States. Bliven and Perlman, 2003, a guide to permitting small pile-supported docks and piers. Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management, 2014, report on the 2013 Rapid Assessment Survey of Marine Species at New England bays and harbors, and the multiple peer-reviewed scientific papers and the references and bibliography of the above reports and other peer-reviewed publications provided for the record. Well, in a phrase common to Commissioner Avedili, we tried to split the baby, acknowledging the truth that a dock will negatively affect the nearshore environment ecologically and or recreationally, with a waterfront owner's desire to have the privilege of a dock to access and or berth a watercraft. Conservation Commission attempts to balance these conflicting positions using information supplied by the property owner and their agents versus the input from town experts, the shellfish biologist, and past evaluation of Barnstable's coastal habitat, the harbor master for navigational issues, town committees, notably the Shellfish Committee, and information supplied by citizens and citizens organizations like the Barnstable Area Recreational Shellfishers. If to the best of our ability, which is based on CONCOM's expertise and past experience, the net balance of a dock's negative effect on natural resources and the public's use of the land seaward from the mean high tide for fishing, fowling, and navigation is de minimis, then we most often permit the construction and use of the dock. I will provide comment and analysis on 6 ecosystem and or recreation-related topics that pertain to the expansion of both Madden and Randon projects before us. The first is the town's assigning this section of shoreline as highly significant shellfish habitat. What process did the town employ to map our significant shellfish resource and habitat area mapping project for selected embayments in the town of Barnstable? A highly knowledgeable group of 10 individuals with expertise in shellfishing and or the science behind shellfish habitat were organized by our Natural Resources Office to assess shoreline habitat in the Three Bays area. Having independent but expert opinion on evaluating, in this case, shellfish habitat quality, is a well-established process in a host of professional fields and is known as the Delphi method. Dr. Hearn provided irrefutable testimony that the town's method of rating shellfish habitat has a sound basis in science. Actually, one of the subcommittee members is a person that Ms. Wilson herself hires to evaluate shellfish habitat quality, Mr. David Ryan. Additionally of note is the evidence and opinion of Mr. Paul Caruso, a biologist retired from the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries, which was provided in the applicant's material. Like many in this case, Mr. Caruso thought that the town's habitat rating system was a sliding scale rather than the Delphi method, which allows either a yes or a no on whether or not a section of shoreline was highly significant to habitat. Given that Mr. Caruso, quote, rated this not the absolute best on a sliding scale of 10, he nonetheless did rate it in the highly significant range on a sliding scale of an 8 or 9. So Paul Caruso agreed with the other 10 expert members of the significant shellfish resource and habitat area mapping project that this stretch of shoreline is highly significant shellfish habitat. I would like to comment on what characteristics properties make habitat in our town very good for shellfish and those that harvest them. Again, I have a PhD in this material relating to sediment biogeochemistry. We have testimony from our shellfish biologist, Ms. Lewis, that there is a strong age class of soft-shell clams that have recently set on this very shore. She further supported the rating of this shoreline as a 10 out of 10 for shellfish habitat for multiple species of shellfish. Multiple species of shellfish. But the absence of shellfish does not necessarily mean that the habitat is poor. Shellfish populations and recruitment are episodic by nature, and harvest by fishers can temporarily lower shellfish populations. If an area has had historically abundant shellfish populations, then it would be assumed to be good habitat. Additionally, good habitat can be predicted from grain size analysis and the oxidized nature of the surface sediments, along with other physical conditions. Finally, good habitat can be related to the ease of planting of shellfish by our town's shellfish propagation and harvest program in suitable habitat, gaining higher value due to the ease at which recreational shellfishers can access the area. These 2 dock extensions are being built in an area which has wonderful public access on Bridge Street in Osterville, so much so that shellfishing education classes are conducted there. My second point is the depth of water between the outboard engine and sediment at mean low water. Blivens and Perlman note that water which is too shallow likely results in prop wash from the operation of motorized craft, but this should be obvious to anyone who has ever operated a motorboat in shallow water. We in Barnstable have evidence of prop dredging, prop wash in piers that do not have enough distance between boat motors and the underlying sediments, Bothwell Dock and Shoestring Bay and others. Ms. Davis, in her letter from the Division of Marine Fisheries, warns of unavoidable and permanent impacts to shellfish habitat, prop dredging when the boats are operated in too shallow water, and recommends that the dock's floats have a float stops at 30 inches above the sediment. Given the shallow nature of these sites, the proposed docks, hold a second. The proposed docks would have their floats up in the air at every low tide. In Table 1 of Logan et al., the best management practices lists Massachusetts DEP recommending to its local regulatory agencies a depth of water under a float should not be less than 18 inches at mean low water in habitat which is not shellfish significant. But these 2 projects are in significant habitat, so the recommendation is to have a minimum of 30 inches between float and sediment. Years ago, Barnstable's Concom realized that propeller scouring and prop wash had a greater effect on surface sediments, turbidity, and larval shellfish and finfish health than just a motionless stock. So we agreed that our local bylaw should not be less protective than the recommendations from DEP, and we established a 30-inch separation between motor down as it operates departing a dock. Well, as it operates departing a dock and sediment surface. Additionally, if we in the town hope to bring back the eelgrass beds that populate our southern embayments, DEP best management practices suggest a 48-inch depth below floats in their boats and environments that have SAV, submerged aquatic vegetation, to allow these 2 docks to extend from shore and still not gain access to depth of water with a 30-inch below the motor, which we have for years required for shellfish significant habitat, is an assault on all of our shellfish significant shoreline habitat and can lead to a town-wide disastrous effect on shellfish resources. Thirdly, Docks and their associated artificial hard substrate can attract invasive exotic epibiota. See references in the record, Director P. Diodati, 2009 letter, see Grant's 2013 letter, Bullerai and Eroldi, 205 paper, Bullerai and Chapman, 2010 paper, Glaspie et al., 2007 paper. While Ms. Wilson did provide testimony that an invasive tunicate species were not present at either dock and provided 3 other articles, of which I will note that the Bullard et al. 2006 was not a peer-reviewed article, although they did reference Dr. Rowe from Moonstone Oysters. I went to school with him, by the way, at the University of Rhode Island, so I know skid pretty well. The particular species of tunicates emphasized in her submitted papers, Ms. Wilson's papers, were only 1 or 2 of 39 exotic species that the 2013 Sea Grant survey reported. This survey found that 31% of following in the region-wide survey were exotic species, and their presence had increased over time. The proliferation of exotic species changes the environment, can alter ecosystem functioning, and lead to significant economic damage. The peer-reviewed scientific papers put into the record, along with their extensive cited references, clearly show that ecosystem functioning and native species biodiversity can be severely impacted by invasive exotic species. Here at home, the director of Massachusetts Department of Marine Fisheries, Paul Diodati, first concern in his 2009 letter relating to a dock in mapped shellfish habitat was that, quote, pilings provide structure for invasive species, end quote. And finished that letter with a warning that, quote, the continued proliferation of piers in Barnstable and other Cape towns could have a cumulative detrimental effect on the Commonwealth's marine resources and could in time result in a much diminished population of marine species in these embayments, end of quote. My fourth point puts into the record information related to the world's largest fly fishing tournament, the Cheeky Schoolie Tournament here on Cape Cod. I've been a fly fisher for more than 55 years and was a participant this year in this tournament. It is a wade only on walking accessible shorelines, which means you can only fish from mainland Cape Cod. Fishing from any island shore is out of the bounds. See the rules. It is not and does pertain to these 2 dock projects and the proliferation of dock structures on Cape Cod. This is a new concept of mine. I hadn't thought about this before, about this impact. Massachusetts law gives citizens the right to fish, follow, and navigate up to the mean high tide mark. Fly fishing from a wadeable shore requires at least 25 feet of structureless shore behind a person for the backcast, and coupled with the traditionally lighter tackle, line pound test of 15 to 20 pound tippet, and a less sturdy rod, means that a hooked fish does readily tangle and wrap one's fishing line around a subtidal structure like a pile. So one should not expect to land a sizable fish if hooked close to a dock. Therefore, the presence of a dock jutting out from the shoreline precludes one's ability to fly fish within a 50 or so foot, 20 feet on each side of the dock, band of that shoreline. Docks, especially these docks which are so close to public access parking, greatly limit a fly fisher's ability to fish this section of a readily accessible shoreline. In fact, in my 9 hours of fishing in this tournament at multiple sites in Barnstable, I did not see a single fly fisher along a dock-studded shoreline. Docks have removed miles of shoreline from our town from shore-based fly fishers. Fifth is the town's open space and recreation plan of 2018 and the status and future management of lands and waters within the town's borders. Section 4.7.3, Coastal Floodplain and Resource Planning, identifies the town's south-facing coastal resources as very important and stated that the updated plan study area, quote, contains important commercial and recreational shellfish resources and major public beaches and is a popular sailing and power boating venue. The plan strives to balance the health and restoration of natural resource conditions with a heavy demand for public access and impacts associated with water-based activities and structure. A key theme of the plan is providing access to waterways for traditional water-related activities such as shellfishing, fishing, swimming, boating, and nature viewing, end of quote. Section 4.9.3, Fisheries, documents that 85% of the commercial quahog harvest comes from areas within the 3 bays. And in 2017, 2,760 commercial shellfishing permits were issued, along with a controlled number of 47 commercial shellfishing permits. Section 4.12, environmental challenges, acknowledges that many of the environmental challenges that Barnstable faces result from the pace and location of land development over the past half century. Skipping a little bit, continuing the quote, the need to plan for and address open space for recreation and resource protection has been a theme in prior town plans. Skip a little bit, and remains one of the top priorities in Barnstable today, end of quote. Finally, under the summary section of our town's plan, section 7.1.2, protection of fresh and marine surface water bodies, identifies, quote, Barnstable's fresh and marine surface waters are valuable ecological and recreational resources and are truly important open spaces used and enjoyed by the community. Heavy use of the water bodies in their shorelines, coupled with dense development in the watersheds surrounding them, can result in an unintended degradation of vegetation, water quality, animal, and plant life. The town's land use policies, as well as strategies for open space acquisition and management, should continue to protect the town's fresh and marine surface waters, end of quote. Permitting the Randon and Madden dock extensions is clearly in conflict with our town's open space and recreation plan. Finally, Logan et al. Warns that even following a best management practice by a town, deleterious ecosystem and recreational effects can result in a dense build-out of docks along a shoreline. See the aerial picture in the record of Okoyet Bay and Childs River to its west. I have paddled along the shore that has the high density of docks in the developed shoreline, and along the almost no dock or human-altered eastern shoreline of Okoyet Bay. The biodiversity, the health of benthic organisms, the vigor of intertidal environment is sharply different. The Childs River dock-studded shoreline is an extraordinarily degraded environment compared to Okoyet Bay's eastern shore. We, the Conservation Commission, have an obligation to the citizens of our town and its natural resources to not allow such an environmental travesty to our estuarine embayments. The net effect of allowing these two dock extensions over highly significant habitat and in an easily accessible shoreline will almost certainly have major negative ecological and recreational effects. It will not be de minimis. Therefore, this commissioner is firmly against allowing either of these docks, Madden or Randon, to add any more to the docks they already have. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Peak. Let me read some of the information that is in the record. Arlene, I found your supplemental technical document for Appendix A. I did not read the A2 appendix on the DMF, MDMF, Marina and Mooring Policy. That's what I was looking at a little bit. So there's 102 pages of that appendix in the file. Secondly, I think Peak submitted this Barnstable Open Space and Recreational Plan dated January 2026. And then the second one is the Town of Barnstable Shellfish Rating Information by Natural Resource dated July 6, 2022. The next one is a review of the habitat impacts from residential docks and recommended best management practices with an emphasis on the Northeastern United States by John M. Logan and others dated September 2021. The next article is a DMF review of the NOI for Diane Curry dated September 4th, 2009. The next article is the report on the 2013 Rapid Access Assessments Survey of Marine Species at New England Bay and Harbor dated June 2014. The next article is the Artificial Marine Structure Facilities, the spread of a non-indigenous green algae in the northern Adriatic Seas by Fabio Billis and dated 2005. The next article is a mini review, the introduction of a coastal infrastructures as a driver of change in marine environment, by the same author and dated 2009. The next article is the non-indigenous biota on artificial structures could habitats creating facilitate biological invasions by Tim M. Glaveby and Sean D. Collins and others. This is November 2006. A Guide to Permitted Small Pile Supported Dock and Piers by Mass DEP, September 2003. And advertisement page for Jiggy Skoogly Tournament 2026 15th Annual Cape Cod Mass. The aerial for Charles River Falmouth Mass. I think Peter submitted that, and the email submitted by Peter Shampoo dated May 6, 2026. And an email from Liz Lewis dated May 8, 2026 for 104 Great Bay Road. And then Peak was requesting to include the Thomas Ryan 2015, Henry Comscott 2004, Francis Keeley 2005, and Clicks 2005 on the record. But at this point, we only have Thomas Ryan 2015 on the record right now. One thing, so altogether there is like 14 pieces of information in there. And before I go to Bill, I just want to mention a couple of things in here. Number one is based on the Waterway and Harbor Master's comment. This is from May 21st. The proposed dock extends too far out into the mooring field, potential hazardous to navigation imposed on setbacks of fields that allows all waterfront homeowners to navigate along the shorelines. Moorings in proximity, measurements provided to pre-existing moorings are inaccurate due to non-vessel being on the mooring when taken. Chain length, vessel size, and swing rooms were not factored into the measurement. This is the comment from the Waterway and Harbor Master. Arlene, I'm wondering, can you get some more information to be accurate for the mooring field for this two dock area?
The only way that we can get anything more accurate, Tom, I think, is if we can get the permit number off the moorings, and then from the harbor master's office, find out what boat is on that mooring, how long the chain is on that mooring. We made an initial attempt to do that, and we were not able to. So we would have to make assumptions about those things. Usually we give the distance from the mooring to the end of the float or the pier, where if the boat is on the outside of a float in a T configuration, sometimes you've asked for the beam of the boat so that we could measure from that. In this instance, the boats will be perpendicular to shore, so they don't need to extend beyond the end of the float. And in the past, that's been enough for the commission.
But in this case, I think it's more important to get an accurate count on the mooring field. But we can talk to Waterway and Harbor Master and see how much they can give us in terms of that for information for this filing. Let me go to Bill.
Thank you, Tom. Well, there's a lot of information here. I have only one other citation that I will refer to. I haven't submitted it, but I will quote something from it. I'd like to clarify 2 or 3 things. Arlene, you mentioned that the Miller project on Pompanesett, you wanted to get a video for that and thought that was a good precedent or project that might suggest that, yeah, we'll give you, we do give people something less than a 30, even if it has a higher shellfish rating. I'd just like to comment, that was an interesting discussion we had for that meeting. And I think that project was much different than the project, these two projects that we're considering tonight. First of all, the Miller project is on the Pompanesett Bay, and it's a well-known, extremely muddy bottom there. In fact, only about two properties upstream, if you will, and for quite a ways up, the whole place is just a 1 or a 2 shellfish rating. And then you round the corner and it ended up getting a 6, not the 9 or 10 that your projects have. It was a 6. And it made sense to me that a 6 was protecting the soft shell clams. We learned that that soft shell clams are there in the very close shoreline, but there's like nothing out where the boat would be docked or being moved, move out of the area, because that was a completely, muddy, non-shellfish habitat. Unlike this project, where there's not only do you have shellfish lessons being given, there are a fair number of adult hard-shell clams. That shows that, they are surviving there. It's not this dead field, if you will, of mud. So this is shellfish habitat for mercenaria out where the boat would be. That's very different. And that's an area that's also stocked. And they're not stocking over there in Pompanesett. And the Shellfish Committee had no concern for this project. And Amy Croteau, who's part of the natural resource crew, was fine. Liz Lewis, who does so many we like to see 2 shellfish surveys, one by the applicant and then Liz will go out. But there are these projects that are like in no man's land where there just aren't any, and she doesn't even bother. And that was something I happened to bring up. I'm like, did Liz do something? Nah, she didn't even go out. And I remember Angela going, well, I just want to make sure that we're not setting some precedent here. That is a very different habitat than what we have here. So I don't see a similarity. Also, the Waterways Committee and the Harbor Master, they didn't have a problem. Shellfish Committee didn't have a problem. No one had a problem with the Pompanesett. And so I just think there's a big difference there. There's another thing that you just mentioned, Arlene, and that was that there's been an increased ranking in the shellfish rating over time, suggesting that it's improved, that the docks and whatnot, actually things are improving. And that is not true. The shellfish rating that was done in, I believe, 2001 used a sort of the same methodology, but I don't want to cast aspersions, but I guess I will. I think it was done not as well as it could have been. You had the 10 quote unquote experts. Pete talked about their credentials and whatnot. But if some of them really didn't know the area, they didn't vote. And if only 7 people voted and said, yeah, it's good, and 3 said nothing, it got a rating of 7. Because it was a yes, no. It wasn't a sliding scale in each person. And then you average them. It's either yes or no. And how many people said it was good? And then this 2000, whatever the heck it was, 21, 22, the more recent one. I haven't written it down in my notes here, but like about 3 years ago, they went out and they did it again. And this time the order was, all right, you 10, you're going to vote. We want you to check this all out and we want you to vote. And so therefore you end up having 10 out of 10 being, there's 10 different judgments, and things changed. As a result, you end up having 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. That's very different. So what does it mean by a 7 or a 6 or a 10? And, to suggest that it's now gone up, it does not mean that the habitat has improved. Also, you mentioned that, well, this West Bay has, most properties have docks, and most properties, docks have motors, not all of them. And in fact, here's a couple of projects that are non-motorized. And to suggest that, well, most of them got their docks and they've only got 12-inch minimum depths, and it happened before the Conservation Commission set up a 30-inch rule for good quality shellfish habitat. We know better. We know that 12 inches is not adequate. And Pete has ably described how 30 inches or 48 inches is appropriate. The Department of Marine Fisheries actually calls for the 48 in order to protect eelgrass. And we talk about the well-being of our estuaries and how they have been diminished and the loss of eelgrass. Well, as it turns out, I would strongly suspect that the motorboats have done a major job on the eelgrass in our bays. And there was a workshop, and this is a workshop that was done at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. And the report is dated 1998. And it's the proceedings thereof. And it's a big fat report. I found it online. Maybe you are familiar with it, Arlene. But it's got a number of studies. And there was a guy, Preston Harge, who has an article in this proceedings, and he's from Maryland, and he was in charge of recreational boating in the Chesapeake Bay, and the people back in the 90s are going, what are we gonna do? I don't know, these boats. What are we gonna do for? Is it a problem? Is it not a problem? And they did studies. I'd just like to read one paragraph, and it's kind of a cool paragraph. It's somebody that looked at prop wash and depth requirements or what have you for boats. And it said, our 1994 study indicated some problems with boats causing the resuspension of sediments, particularly in waters a meter or less in depth, i.e. 39 inches. We looked at Dickinson Bay and the Road River areas with recreational use. We used 4 types of small boats. 2 were jet-propelled and 2 were propeller-driven. We did not see much difference in the amount of sediment resuspension between the propulsion types, but we did notice that boats that went slower and were more heavily loaded stirred up more sediment than those more lightly loaded and traveling faster. And elsewhere, he said, with these small boats, they found that if a small boat will get up on plane, it's actually good because the prop is not down there trenching up the sediment. So, he's finding, a meter, when it's under a meter, you've got real problems with prop wash. And so we know that that's how we protect our bays, and we didn't. And there were a lot approved that didn't get that 30 inches. And in fact, I think at one point we lost a case somewhere where we tried to impose a 30-inch and it didn't stick. But that's worth bearing in mind for the record. I guess that's what I have to say. Thanks.
Hey, Bill, can you submit that article that you just quoted?
Yes, I will. I will. Well, I could send you the whole. Yeah, it's a big fat electronic document. I didn't want to wipe. I printed out a few pages for this guy's report from the Chesapeake.
Yeah.
Like 200 pages or whatever. So Woods Hole
Okay.
Symposium.
Okay.
Thank you.
Angela.
Thank you, Tom. There's a lot of information here, and I don't want to speak on whether this, the intent of the law or whether this environment is good or bad. I guess I want to just, the asks from Arlene are clear. She's got a permanent dock here, and she's asking for it to be 14 feet longer, and she's asking for less than a 30-inch draft. Is that what the ask is, Arlene, on 95?
Yes.
Okay. And nobody is for this project but the applicant for various reasons, correct? I'm just saying, I haven't heard, I understand you did a lot of work to say that you're not going to hurt the area anymore. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying all of our subcommittees or advisory committees, nobody has approved this project, correct?
The comments that you have received from Waterways and from the shellfish biologist, I haven't actually seen comments from the Shellfish Committee itself, but no, those comments have been adverse.
Okay, that's what I thought. I watched the committee hearings. I try to get an understanding as the big picture. Yeah. And I'm trying to understand too what our role is here as far as permitting a dock when you already have a permanent pier and now you want to make it longer and you want the draft to be less than 30. So those are the two issues I have with this project clearly at this point tonight. And I'm not trying to advocate or cite anything or talk about anything else other than those two issues. So I kind of wanted you to be clear that those are the two that I'd like addressed or at least talked about or at least focused on from my understanding. It's not that I'm trying to not, they already have a pier, they want it longer and they want to be able to put a boat on it with less than the draft that the commission has set as a mitigation strategy in order to have piers but also work on protecting the environment. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Angela. Just want to clarify one thing, though, is the existing pier is a permanent pier without motorboat.
Okay.
That's the existing pier.
Okay.
The proposed one is to extend it 47 or 48 feet out and to allow for a motorboat. But the applicant has not selected a boat yet. That's the status as far as I know, what that application is. That is the same thing in 117. But one question that I want to kind of asking Arlene is, what happened if you keep the existing pole the same as what they have installed and not ripping out and all that stuff, just to extend it with the new poles? So that would minimize a lot of disturbance in the substrate when you're building the extensions. Is that an option?
I'm not sure I'm following you, Tom. If we expanded the pier but didn't have a motorboat, is that what you're asking?
I'm just talking about
or if we had a motorboat at the existing pier.
No. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about ripping out the existing pier, right? With the distance between the poles to a longer distance. All I'm saying is that if you keep the existing pier at its current positions, keep the existing poles, and just extend that piece with a new distance, 14 feet, whatever the stuff that you needed to do, is that would minimize a lot of disturbance when you're rebuilding the pier. Is that an option?
It would be an option, Tom. The only problem is that the existing pier has piles that are so close together that they're contrary to everybody's recommendations. Contrary to CZM, to the DEP small dock, to Logan's report, to, all the things that everybody has said for ages. If you wanted us to keep that and would allow us simply to lengthen off the end of it, that'd be fine. It's a lot cheaper for the applicant, but I'm not sure that it's better for the environment.
I just want to float it out there as just a thought for myself.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
John.
Thank you, Tom. To Tom's last point, Arlene, the difference would be that you'd be tearing up and putting in. So certainly the short-term disturbance would be significantly more than Tom's suggestion. Just that was my reaction to it. I want to start by saying, Angela, I appreciated your question because I heard from the first hearing you ended the hearing with that question, and that was the first question on my mind. So I think we've got that straightened out. But what she is looking for is 1, an extension, 2, a waiver on the 30-inch rule, and 3, going from non-motorized to motorized. So I think those are the 3 specific asks. Is that correct, Arlene?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I also want to make a comment for everybody, because I too have done a lot of research on this, and I go back to the law. This is my background. It says, quote, not likely to have unacceptable, significant, or cumulative effects on the wetland resources protected by the regulation. Regulation then says, what are some of those resources? Such as wildlife habitat, shellfish, fisheries, recreation, which we included navigation in, aesthetics, and I think the last one was agriculture and aquacultural values. So I think we as commissioners are bound by that. I would respectfully say, for example, the Barnstable recreation plan is not within our purview, and we can't rely on that. We don't have the authority to control environmental issues in the town of Barnstable, except for the authority given to us by the bylaw and the state law. And I think now we're talking more the bylaw. But I have several questions, Arlene. First of all, relating to the shellfish study, there is a 10 rating. You're citing 3 or 4, I think, site-specific, but we also have testimony from the town biologist that would contradict that. So we're caught in a dilemma. We have to sort of, and Pete, it's not splitting the baby, it's reaching a balance, is my comment, so in all due respect. We have to weigh that evidence. Which one do we want to conclude that we're going to rely on? Your studies or the shellfish rating or Lynn's and the other evidence presented to us. I have to say about these shellfish ratings, I heard Bill and Pete argue, but I was back when we drafted these and we talked about them and we dealt with the shellfish ratings. Fact of the matter is, guys, a lot of those 10 people don't go to the specific sites. They've heard from fellow fishermen and specialists that it's a great area. So they're not really site specific as we require. That's why when we wrote the regulations, we did 2 things. 1, we require the applicant to notify the town biologist. 2, we require the applicant to issue a specific shellfish study for that area. And then let me address that, something that Liz said, Arlene, that I want you to address. She felt that because you've combined these areas, that your shellfish study was not accurate, that it, I think her words were, it inflated the findings. So first question, could you please address that issue?
Sure. What we did and what we frequently do is to have the shellfish biologist look at the entire width of the owner's shoreline so that we can pick an area that maybe has less significance. Sometimes you wind up with a site that has a density of shellfish in one location and nothing in another. in this case, because we knew we were doing piers side by side, we had Dr. Newbert look at the entire area. And also because we knew that particularly Commissioner Sampu frequently wanted to know what was going on nearby as well as on site. And we were interested in whether there might be invasives in the area. We had her extend the study to the piers that were north and south of our two sites. Because she worked on a 10-foot grid, we can isolate the sample plots that she did that wind up in the area of our piers. And in particular for the Madden site, we know that she found no soft shell population. Now, Liz says she found some soft shells at Madden site, not a lot. But even if she did, the pier, the boat and the float are seaward of the band of shellfish, of soft shell population, much as they are at Pomponetsit, because you simply don't get soft shells where the water is significantly deeper than mean low water. And she said that she didn't find much of a population of hard shells either. She noted that she found some big old shellfish and thought that maybe they had been there for a long time. And the comment about the sediment having degraded around them. I found that a little strange, to be honest, because I don't think that the sediment is very degraded at this site. But in addition to that, knowing that the town stocks the area around this pier for their put and take program, and that they only stock with shellfish that are big enough to be harvestable, because that's the intent, is you put the stuff in the water so that it can be harvested essentially instantly. The fact that there are large older quahogs that somebody might have missed in the harvest doesn't surprise me at all. And with no juveniles at the site, and that's consistent amongst 4 shellfish studies over 14 years. There's not much there by way of native population for a motorboat to disturb. The difference between having history on the area that's consistent and having a one-time study. And I know some of you over time have complained that a one-time snapshot isn't a good way to judge things because you never know what happened the day before you were out there. Well, that's true. But having 4 studies over 14 years that are very consistent, even though they were done at different times of the year, is an indication that that's the true extent of the resource in the area.
Did any of those studies address shellfish habitat versus simply count of shellfish?
Yeah, ours did. We also look at sediment in the area. And we actually went out and did sediment analysis with grain size distribution studies. For each pier, those are in the NOIs. So we did look at that issue. This is a little off of your question, John, but it came up in Angela's comments and before as well. The issue of turbidity and turbidity studies. Some years ago, John, I think you were still on the commission then for the Rogers Pier, which is on Old Post Road.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And the issue of turbidity was prime to that particular pier. And the commission allowed us to, or allowed Mr. Rogers to have his large boat at the pier with less than 30 inches of draft. In fact, it's got slightly less than 12 inches of freeboard. On the condition that we would do follow-up studies for 3 years, looking at the bathymetry of the area to see if in the medium sands that were at the area, having a boat that was properly operated had any impact on bottom topography and on the sediments, whether it would result in the collection of fine sediments in the area. And we did that. He has a substantial tiara with big motors. And we went back every year for 3 years and found no impact. And he still has a large boat at his pier. There are also, we included in our NOI some other turbidity studies and a review of one of those turbidity studies that was done at the request of the commission, although you didn't pay for it, by Dr. Lee Wisher. And his conclusion was that a motorboat properly operated, it did not have an impact on turbidity or bathymetry in those kinds of sediments. And his site had much finer grained sediments than the Rogers site or than the Madden site. And all that information was provided to you.
I would go on to another question, but before I leave this, I would ask Ed and Tom, do you feel, and I'm not looking for an answer now, but maybe in the conversation, do you feel that the study submitted by the applicant was sufficiently site-specific such that it meets our standard practices? I would leave that question and Tom to address in a minute, but let me go on to something else. And that's this issue of the mooring field. As you know, you're saying the boat's going to be tied up parallel your boat under your proposal. But one of the things that we do know, and I've seen this personally since I boat a lot, is that these moorings, they swing. They do have long chains. They do swing. So that 76-foot number could fall significantly. And I think that is a very relevant piece of information that I would like to have. Because I think the issue of navigability, navigation, especially in light of the Harbor Master and Waterways Committee, their comments, we need to address the concerns that they express and the reason why they would not support this application. I don't think we have enough evidence. We rely heavily on their expertise, and I don't think there's enough evidence on the record from the applicant to refute their recommendation. So that's a concern that I have. Another comment I would make, you said, I think your words were a small, shallow draft boat. I owned an 18-foot whaler that had a head on it. So it's amazing. It was a very small head, and my wife refused to use it, but the fact is that even small boats do have heads, Elaine. So I'm not sure I'd agree with your comment on that. So that's a concern. I think this navigation issue is a very serious one. Let me look over here. There was something that came up at the earlier hearings, which I've listened to now several times, with regard to this open area that around the mooring field is closed, but we got an approval to open the areas between the docks. Liz was worried that any change would reopen that question, which could result in an additional closing, was her fear of this area. Can you address that issue for me, please?
Yes. So the document that's included in our appendix about how the state goes about deciding whether areas should be open or closed is based on two things. First, the density of boats, and secondly, the number of those boats have heads. They only look at areas that are dense enough to be marinas if they're fixed, which means an area that has 10 or more boats on one or more piers in close proximity, or mooring fields. So the area to the west of the Madden and Brandon sites is a designated mooring field by the town. It has a substantial boat density. The division looked at that and said, yeah, well, there are enough of those boats big enough to have heads. And that was the basis of the idea that the mooring basin would be closed in season for shellfishing, as are all the other mooring basins in town, as far as I know. The area along the shoreline, I think, was far enough away from the mooring field, and the density of boats was low enough that the town was able to say, okay, here's the dividing line between the mooring basin and the area that we want open for shellfish. And the state agreed with that. That's the best of my knowledge.
So it's a little bit hard to predict that if this change came into effect, if it was approved, we really don't know what they would do relative to keeping open the space between docks or closing it, right? That's a bit of an unknown at this point. Is that a fair statement?
Based on the guidance that's in that document, I believe it is known that they would not close the area along the shoreline just because these two pieces changed. Okay. There are sailboats on both of these piers now. You could put a head in the sailboat.
Your opinion, thank you. Going back to a comment you made a few minutes ago, by the way, you said several times, when operated properly. I have seen, especially in the COVID years, people were buying boats and had no idea how to run them, no idea how to operate them. So an assumption of operating properly is, based on my experience, kind of a wishful thinking. One final question. You've been around a long time. You've studied a lot of these. You've done representing a lot of these applicants for piers and docks. You also were a former commissioner, I think, years ago, even before my time, Marlene. Are you aware of any problem in this area, in Barnstable, of invasive species?
No. And when we were looking at the projects, in particular, the JMS Holdings project, where this issue of invasives came up, we asked the dock manager at Oyster Harbors Marine, which is or was then the closest, densest area of boating activity, and where there were apt to be boats that were operated in a number of other environments than ours. So they could, in fact, be transporting invasives into the area, if you would. And we asked the dock manager if they noted any tunniquets as a problem in the area. He said no, they did not have much by the way of tunniquets on the piles in their marina. Certainly there aren't any on the bottom. As I think you know, John, I've done a lot of work at Oyster Harbors Marine over time. We never saw them. I know that they are documenting them at the Sandwich Marina, not the tunniquets that invade on the bottom, mat forming, but tunniquets that are hanging on the floats. And what happens is that the floats come out of the water in the winter, the tunniquets get desiccated and fall off onto the land. They smell. Anybody who's been around a place where they store floats for the winter knows that. And they go back in the water without them in the summer. So I know that goes on, but I haven't seen them locally. We see an occasional sea squirt or a sea cucumber on somebody's float, but not on piles. As to the proper operation of boats, I think probably you are aware that in Massachusetts, we are now requiring anybody who operates a boat to take a course and pass a test and have a permit with them, much like a driver's license. So with luck, we're going to see fewer improper operations, but there's always going to be somebody on the water, as there is somebody in a car who's had too much to drink or is operating under the influence of some other kind of recreational drug. You can't eliminate it entirely, but I think it will be less, and you cannot, any public agency cannot withhold licenses on the fact that they think somebody may do it wrong. It's just not a proper application of law.
Say myself, I find these very, very difficult. I'm a very sensitive counselor to the earlier court decisions that reversed us. I absolutely want to follow the standard that the court said and our regulations say, and I think that's critical. But clearly,
I can't hear you, John.
Oh, hello?
Yeah, go ahead. I can hear you.
Arlene, can you hear me? Arlene, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you, John. I don't know why Arlene can't hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Thanks. But here we are with a case that probably you've seen a lot, where we really do have conflicting evidence. And it's our job to kind of weigh that evidence and come up with a conclusion, following the regulations, following the standard that the court laid out and that our regulations laid out. So I'm just speaking for myself. I would like a little bit more information relative to are these site-specific surveys permitted, and secondly, this navigation issue in light of.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but John's audio isn't coming through at all, Tom.
Brian can hear me. Everybody else can hear me.
I can hear John very well.
None of you, I guess.
I think it's yours. Yeah. Sorry.
No, we can hear John pretty well in terms of his comment.
Well, let me just conclude. I've spoken enough. Speaking for me, it's a difficult decision because we are facing a following strictly the guidelines from the court, following strictly our own regulations, we see conflicting testimony right here. And we have to make that decision based on our experience, our judgment, et cetera, which way we're going to come out. So, end my comments.
Thank you, John. Couple of things I just want to mention. Number one, like Arlene mentioned, there is a DMF comment. The letter is dated May 12th, so that is in that file, and there is no time of restriction, as Arlene mentioned, as far as the comment goes. And secondly, to answer John's questions, as far as the shellfish study for this specific locations for the extensions, if you look at the shellfish report that is dated in 2023, it is looking at the general area without the extensions posted on the drawing. So in this drawing here, it's not including the extensions as part of that, study. So the study is in general taking the past history to say that general area, but without the extension showing up on the drawing. So to me, that is not sufficient enough for that extensions that you need to add that on for the shellfish report. Let me go to Bill.
I'd just like to compliment John Abadili. I wasn't sure where you were going as you were questioning the shellfish rating. At first, I was thinking you were suggesting, well, it's really not all that valuable, and I think it does have value, and it's not a great rating system, but it does have some value, and our bylaw bases the depth requirement on essentially two things. One is the rating, and then a survey by the applicant. We're looking for the applicant, and we hope that Liz Lewis and company are going to corroborate that. And that's really what we have. And the problem that I have as a population biologist, scientist in my former career is that it's really confounded by shellfish harvest, right? Stocking, what's happening? We have no real handle on what constitutes a really good population or a bad population. It's like, Arlene will say, it's terrible population. It's very minimal. And yet we had the Megalodon, most recent one, 54 of their stations out of 450 had shellfish on it. I mean, that's something. And over time, it looks like there are these hard shell clams. They're there and they survive and they live. It's not like Pomponesset where it's just a mud hole and everyone just writes it off because it just doesn't support hard shell clams out there. And so, that we are. And so, John, you summarized that nicely. I just want to compliment you on that because it's like we have conflicting testimony. We also have some feedback from a panel that says, no, this is good. This is good, worthy habitat. And it's stocked. And there are shellfish lessons given there, whether or not they have permission or not. I mean, this seems like, a place that should be protected with our 30-inch. And then with regard to the water quality thing, I was going to mention this and I forgot when I first spoke. Liz Lewis was like really kind of worked up about the possibility of losing the ability to stock even the shoreline. And you brought that up, John. And she acknowledged that, yes, we've told them that they're, how many heads? Oh, they don't have toilets on the boat. These are small boats. And yet I could see, and I don't think she was faking it. I really felt like she's really concerned. And so that when Arlene comes along and just says, well, it's how many heads you have and how many boats, and there are no heads, so they're not going to change anything. She seemed really concerned, and I don't know how to deal with that. And in a way, it's moot because I think that the depth requirement that they're asking for is just, it's not a good thing. But on top of that, I'm very concerned about the possibility of it having a water quality thing. I don't know how you deal with that. What do you go to the FDA? And it's kind of an intractable, unsolvable concern. And then with regard to your question about whether or not these surveys are the survey is reasonable, I remember Liz saying, one site is so much better than the other, and that they really should have been handled separately, and that sticks in my head. So
that's what basis of my question about specific.
So
it was her comments that really drove that question, Bill. I have to say.
So you've got. I don't know. Thank you, John, for summarizing it nicely.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, actually, Ms. Wilson, clear up something for me here. Soft-shell clams, Maya, is the genus. Can they live subtidally?
They can, yes. Yes.
I thought so, because down in Chesapeake, that's how they harvest them. So how does someone who's doing a shellfish survey, like Dr. Newbert, how does she ascertain whether or not there are subtitle Maya there?
They look at everything that they find in their sample plots and notice them by species and by size. So if there had been soft shells subtitled there, they would have showed up in her sampling. Liz mentioned that she was unhappy about the equipment that they use for sampling, but that issue had been settled a number of years ago on a different project, and Amy Croteau had reviewed the equipment that Dr. Newbert and her staff uses and said that the equipment was fine for finding both soft shells and hard shells, as well as other organisms, benthic organisms in our area.
Okay, because I'm a shellfisher. I think everyone knows that. I myself don't have any equipment, and you'd have to. Again, this is a bit hearsay that you're giving to me, Ms. Wilson. I really don't know how you're going to sample soft-shell clams subtidally that are in a depth of water much deeper than 12 inches. They are subsediment upwards to 12 inches deep. So a rake by which you sample Mercenaria, you're not ever going to get a soft-shell clam like that. I have another bit of sort of checking on an assertion that you made. Again, I completely agree, Ms. Wilson, that there are no ascidians, also known as tunicates, no ascidians on the docks or in the vicinities. As I've said, I've got a PhD in biological oceanography. I do not have the taxonomical expertise to identify the over 30 other invasive species that have been identified in the waters of Cape Cod on structures. I don't have that expertise, and I doubt very much if anyone you've talked to has that level of expertise. It is very confounding, and something that has been there a while. It could be something that it's not noticed as invasive, but it could be a non-native species. So I doubt very much if anyone that you've referenced has that taxonomical expertise to identify the 30 plus invasive species that are in our waters. You asserted that the Rogers Pier study had information that showed that a big boat had no effect. Do we have that in the record here right now, that study?
I think I gave you the citation for it, and certainly the study is in the records of the commission. So if you pull the record for that particular project, all
Okay.
that information is there.
Okay, but I don't have access to it associated with these two piers to assess the strength of your assertion. I will say that I'm going to add another correction. You had two experts look at the benthic habitat and or sample mollusks. You had Dr. Newbert, who Megalodon. Again, our shellfish biologist, Liz Lewis, had a little bit of trouble with the statistical method used by Dr. Newbert to lessen the average density of clams in the area. But you also had Paul Caruso. And as I stated in my long-winded first testimony, Mr. Caruso, again, great experience, long in our town and long history of the Department of Marine Fisheries. He gave this habitat a high value rating. He tried to hedge it as like it's not quite a 10, but that was on a sliding scale. He gave it an 8 or 9. That in everyone's book is a high value shellfish area. So one of your experts made the argument that it was low value. Your other expert said it was high value. And we have testimony from Ms. Lewis that it is high value. So it's not an even yes, one, yes, no. There's two yes, high value, one of them being yours, and one being no. Again, Ms. Lewis drew some concern on how Dr. Newbert arrived to that conclusion. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Pete. I think we discussed a lot of information on here. If I can kind of wrap it up and kind of like, I think we're still needing some information about the mooring field in this area to confirm what the impact would be if we extend the pier. And then the other thing is that for the shellfish study, you should do it with the extension piece in that locations, because the previous study was that's the proposed pier on the previous one.
I'm not following that at all, Tom. Would you like me to superimpose the location of the proposed pier on Dr. Newbert's grid so that you can see where which samples fall within the footprint of the pier and 10 feet either side, which is what you would normally have, and then isolate those results?
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. Can you do that?
Okay.
We also need the navigation information. If Tom, maybe you could assist, or Ed can assist Arlene in getting what she needs to answer that question.
For the mooring field?
Yes.
Okay. The other
because
one,
as we all know, the swing could be pretty large.
Right.
And is this just for 95 right now? We're just talking about 95 Eel River Road?
I suspect right now, but I suspect that maybe the same issues in the next matter.
I have a different issue to bring up, so I wanted to make sure that I didn't know when we were getting there. Okay, thank you.
Sorry. The next one.
Yeah,
the next one.
We just concentrate on the 95 right now, and I want to wrap it up so that we can go to the next.
Got it.
The other things that we were talking about is the Roger Pierce study. Do we want to find that information to take a look?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a few things to do here. Arlene, do you want to take a continuous? It give you time to come up with those informations?
I guess first I'd like to know if Brian wanted to say anything about
Sure.
the assumptions on permitting.
Brian, you're muted.
Appeals.
Brian, unmute yourself.
Can Arlene say what she said again? I had a little difficulty hearing her.
Arlene just mentioned that she wants to give you a chance to say about anything about the permitting, or you want to wrap up the application on the 95 Eel River Road.
And take a continuance.
Right.
Yeah, I think at this particular point, we'll ask for the continuance and move forward.
How much time do you think you'll need? I have June 9, 16, and 23.
Let's try for the 16th if Brian's clear on that date.
Yes, that's fine.
Is that an afternoon meeting?
Yeah, that's our afternoon meeting at 3 o'clock. Okay. Could I have a motion to continue this applications to June 16?
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Tangney, aye. Sampu,
Aye.
Kashulik,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
DeMello,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Abadili.
Aye.
June the 16th, continuance to June the 16th.
Thank you. The next continues Pamela Randon's to reconstruct and extend existing permanent pier, replace ramp and floats, relocate kayak rack, and provide electric and water services at 117 Eel River Road, Osterville, as shown on the Assessors Map 116 parcel 097. Again, this is a continuance from April the 28th and May 19th. And the quorum is every commissioner tonight. And again, John has watched the tape and joined through the Moreland rule. And as I mentioned that in 95 Eel River Road, all those articles and informations are also included in this docking. Same thing as Arlene submit that appendix, supplemental information that is all part of that package as well. We also have a division DMF comment on the Eel River Road, and as 117 Eel River Road is May 12. Those condition is similar to the one from the 95 Eel River Road. Do you want to speak first, Brian or Arlene?
I would defer to Arlene.
Okay. Let me try and share my screen again.
Okay.
Get to the right plan. There we go. So again, to recap on the Randon Pier, which is at 117 Eel River Road, there is an existing permanent pile-supported pier at this location. It has Chapter 91 and a Corps of Engineers permit. It extends 71 feet from low water to the end of the existing float. It has 10-inch diameter piles set in bents 8 feet apart. The proposed pier starts at the same point on the land and has an angle point in it slightly to the north to access slightly deeper water because just as is the case in the previous year, we are hoping that you will give us permission to have 12 inches of freeboard, which would allow us to have a small, shallow draft motorboat at this site. Because the bent spacings have been increased from 8 feet to about 14 and a half feet, the extension of this pier only results in about a half a square foot of increased bottom usurpation. It will be the fixed walkway section of the pier is about 8 feet longer than the existing fixed walkway. So the impact in the off season is we believe rather minimal. The float is 128 feet from the mooring to the northwest, and I apologize, but the moorings do not show on the larger plan. Whoops. My fingers are not working to get fine-tuning on these plans, but there is a mooring off-site slightly to the northwest. It's 128 feet away from the end of the float, and one essentially to the west, which is 110 feet. The float will be 85 feet from the pier to the south one, and extend 6 feet further into the waterway than that existing pier. Again, I would cite the filing for the Miller project at 640 Pompanesett Road, where at its last meeting, the commission allowed a variance from the 30-inch rule in a high value shellfish area to 12 inches on the basis of a single shellfish study, which showed a population density significantly lower than one would anticipate in even a 6 ranking for the shellfish maps. Here, as with the previous application, we have 14 years of studies done by 4 different experts, all of which show a continuation of very low shellfish populations, about 2.3 animals per square foot. So it's in this case, we have a significant history of shellfish inventories showing very similar results. And again, I would call your attention to town aerial photography, which shows the density of piers in the area from the Bridge Street landing to the end of Eel River, with essentially every lot that could have a pier already having a pier. Most of those piers have motorboats on them. Most of those boats do not conform to the current 30-inch rule because they were permitted predominantly prior to the rule. But even in the face of that, most of the area is ranked very highly for shellfish, an indication, I believe, that the density of piers, density of motorboats, and the motorboat use is not having a significant adverse effect on shellfish habitat in the area. We've got the same information from Commissioner Sampu about the access for rod fishing, and I would make the same comment that I had before, is that that kind of access falls under the colonial ordinances. Colonial ordinances are regulated not by the Commission, but by the Mass Division of Waterways. The Mass Division of Waterways has given the existing pier at the site a Chapter 91 license, indicating that they believe that longshore access for fishing, fouling, and navigation meets the requirements of the law. And in addition to that, the Conservation Commission also gave the pier a permit at a time when recreation was a protected interest of the ordinance. And one must believe that if it had been a big issue, the commission would not have given them that permit. So we've also noted that Dr. Sampu has provided the same studies on tunniquets and the potential for invasive tunniquets. We have found none at the site, on the existing piles, on the bottom around the pier, or anywhere in the vicinity. As I mentioned before, I am unaware of there being any invasive tunniquets or there being a problem from tunniquets, whether they are invasive or native, in the area, or even in the marina, which is the Oyster Harbors Marine slightly to the north, where the density of boats is such that if there were going to be a problem, you might anticipate there would be, but there isn't. I certainly agree with Pete that trying to identify the individual species of tunniquets is very difficult. Woods Hole Oceanographic found it to be so difficult that they actually developed a manual for identification of the species. I think in the JMS Holdings, the Martin Pier and the McParland Piers, we cited that study. But whether the species that are in the area are invasives or not, there aren't any here. Let's see. There were a number of additional concerns raised by Liz Lewis in her shellfish report for this site. I've answered those in my supplemental document of May 21st. I don't think I need to go into many of them again here. I would note that the DMF comment letter for this site, much as it did for the Madden site, does not suggest that the pier should be disallowed. They did cite, again, the winter flounder and anadromous fish run in the bay. They did not recommend time of year restrictions. We're happy to abide by any time of year restrictions that the commission might suggest. Ms. Lewis also mentioned a concern for this pier, as she did for the northerly pier, that losing the existing pier would make it difficult to identify the area that's open for shell fishing, much as with the previous proposal. We are certainly happy to install a marker so that the visual point or the edge of the shellfish area is not lost. The issues of small boat operations and turbidity, again, are the same here as they were for the pier to the north. The Rogers project, I think, put a lot of that to bed. It still is somewhat dependent on people operating their boats properly. And as I said previously, I do not believe that any permitting agency should be withholding a permit on the basis that the operator of a boat at the facility might do it wrong. I think you have to, on the contrary, make an assumption that people do it right. And again, relative to Liz's comments about the Newbert report degrading the data by having so much information, we can do the same thing with this site that we did or would do with the one to the north, and that is we can overlay the pier on Dr. Newbert's grid and isolate the sample plots that are within the footprint of the pier and 10 feet on either side, and give you the numbers of shellfish and species and sizes that Dr. Newbert found in the actual location where the pier would be, if you feel that you need that. And I know that Ms. Lewis said she found a significant population of soft-shell clams here, with some immature indicating that there was a native set here. Much as with the previous pier, the location of the berthing for a boat would be well beyond the normal area in which a soft-shell population is found, and it is beyond the area which Ms. Lewis found her soft-shell population in. And much as with the previous one, the hard-shell population is very scant and does not indicate that there's a natural set. They seem to be larger shellfish, likely the result of the seeding program that the town does. And I would be happy to answer any questions you might have, again, as long as my voice holds up.
Yes, we have a long night here. So I would like to request that extension that you're going to put on the McDonald's grid layout in terms of the shellfish, as we just mentioned. And then secondly, on the waterway and harbor master, they have the same comment about the mooring field that extended into that proposed dock extension so far out into the mooring field, potential hazardous to navigation imposed on setback of the field that allow all waterfront homeowners to navigate along the shoreline. Mooring in proximities, measurement provided to pre-existing mooring are inaccurate due to no vessel being on the mooring when taken. So this is part of the same request for the mooring field informations that we did for the 95 Eel River Road. Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Arlene, can you hear me?
Yes.
As far as the ask goes, again, I just need the summary for my notes. Again, this is a permanent structure already there. And is it a change to motorized?
Yes.
Okay.
So we would be extending the pier length out to
7 or 8
100 feet from low water and
right.
Asking for a small motorboat.
And you're asking for the draft, a waiver on the draft. The only difference now then for me in my notes was you're also restructuring the pier and you need to remove the old pier, which will make a significant impact on this one that 95 would have not done, correct?
Well, we'd be changing the pile system on the 95 one, so it'd be in the same general footprint, but the pile location would be different. Here,
right, but 117 You actually have to remove the old pier, correct?
That's correct, and that's
Okay.
a one-time impact, short term.
Right, okay, I'm just trying to make sure I have my notes
Yep.
correct from the last time. And this is right at a property line issue, is that correct?
No,
Okay, that's what I had in my notes.
no. The regulations, the Chapter 91 regulations, which are the ones that set the distance off the sideline, ask for a 25-foot setback from property lines. There is case law with Chapter 91 from probably 10 or 15 years ago that found that once you hit the low water mark, there are no sidelines because the department owns the land under the water as well as the water. In addition to that, even at Chapter 91, if the abutter says they don't have a problem with the pier being closer than 25 feet to the property line, then the agency is fine with it as well. And here, Mr. Madden and Ms. Randon have agreed to the layouts of these piers. And if we need to get that for you in writing, we're happy to.
Right, so that isn't something you're asking our permission for. You have to ask somebody else, some other board for permission to do that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody else who regulates it. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Arlene, on the same point that you were just mentioning, I would like that clarifications about the property line issues regarding to below the mean low water.
Sure.
Bill.
Knowing that Kim is going to be making minutes and probably having the two projects separate, I would just like to, and I'm not going to go through it, but I commented on why I think that the Miller project over at Shoestring Bay on the Pompanesett area is apples and refrigerators, and it should not apply. And I made a comment to that effect. I would want that to be reflected in the minutes relative to this project. And for that matter, I think most of the comments that I made on the other project, I would say apply here as well. I won't go through it again. But I also would say that when we called for a continuance on this, I will not be around on the 16th, and I have not told Tom that. And I was about to, and it's like, I agreed to that, but I won't be around on the 16th. So that may have some bearing on whether we have a continuance on this one on the 16th. But anyway, that's a problem I have. So thank you.
Bill, if
yes,
you are not here, you want to participate on this hearing, right?
I would love to, yeah. But
on the 95 and Newville and the 117, right?
Yes.
What will you be back on the 23rd?
On the 23rd, I will be back. Yes, for sure.
Okay. Pete.
Okay, similar to Bill, I'm not likely to read or to speak that long series of analyses, comments that I had. Can I make the request that go into this stocks application as well?
Yep, you can do that.
I do have some additional new points to be making. Again, I'm going to mention my fellow commissioners. Ms. Wilson keeps bringing up invasive tunicates. Yeah, they do exist. But they're a tiny portion, like 10% of invasive species in New England waters. So I think this, and again, Ms. Wilson submitted into the record three articles, Tyrell and Byers in 2007, Bullard et al. 2006, which was not peer reviewed, and then Tijkstra, that was a hard one to say, 2017, which had wide-ranging invasive species likely to benefit. I read all of these and I can understand them. Ms. Wilson didn't bring their pertinence into our discussion, but they are all dealing with tunicates. That's not my worry. That's not the worry of Diodati. That's not the worry of our state biologists. There are a host of other invasive species. It's not just tunicates. They are the easiest to identify and see. They're big. Another question sort of I have to my fellow commissioners, and has Department of Marine Fisheries ever asked us to deny a pier? I can't ever remember that.
No.
I can't.
I think it's in their purview or in their recommendations that if we are going to, these are the suggestions that we should follow. But I don't think just because they didn't deny either of these piers that means they're okay with it. I read their recommendations as having some serious trouble with this. Secondarily, and again, I'm going to get back to soft-shell clams that are subtitling. There's been no evidence given in 95 or 117 that subtitle Maya do not exist. You try it with a clam rake, you ain't going to get them. Again, how they do it down the Chesapeake and possibly some places here in Massachusetts, they essentially vacuum them up off the bottom with a bubbler system that raises them up onto a conveyor belt. You cannot sample, I can't, I don't know anyone who can, sample Maya soft-shell clams that are deeper than 2 feet of water or even 18 inches of water, or even almost 12 inches of water. They're brutal. You need near dry land, very low tides to do that.
Pete, I can confirm that.
So can I. I can confirm that too.
Yeah. So those are additional points that I just want to hammer home. Ms. Wilson keeps trying to track us off of these facts. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Any other question from the commissioner? John?
I'd like a question for Pete. Pete, maybe at some time you could, are you aware of any evidence within the town of Barnstable waterways of invasive species? That would help me if maybe you could take a look at that, Pete, before the next hearing. The other question is the same as Tom raised in the first hearing on Eel River. If you left the pier intact and simply extended it, yes, the pilings would be closer, but they've been there for X number of years. So there'd be no additional disturbance, but for the new addition, if it was approved. So I kind of really like you to think about that and maybe address that as a possibility, Arlene.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other question from the commissioner? I forgot to ask. Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
None. Brian and Arlene, since Bill is not available on the 16th, do you think we can continue this to 23rd and then we can do the continuous same thing for 95?
So, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that it can be done, but I think to be very careful, if there happen to be any members of the public that were watching the last hearing and now have left, they won't know that the 16th has been moved to the 23rd. So I think it would be safe for us to simply request a continuance for that hearing and have it announced on the 16th to go over to the 23rd.
Okay.
I'm sorry for being complicated about it, but I think that's the technical answer.
No, that's okay. I don't have a problem with that process.
Okay, I think we would like to have them both on the same night and have a full quorum. So if we could do it that way, that would be great.
Okay. Could I have a motion to continue this applications to June 23rd?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Tangney, aye. Sampu,
Aye.
Koshulik,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
DeMello,
Aye.
Abadili.
Aye.
That's unanimous, Mr. Chair. This one is continued to June 23rd.
Thank you, Arlene, and thank you, Brian.
Thank
I
you,
want to
everyone,
thank
for your
Brian.
time.
Brian, that was very good about the continuance. Thank you. I appreciate that. That was good lawyering.
Thank you, Mr. Hearn. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I appreciate
Yep.
it.
And we have one easy certificate of compliance. Is John Wilbur, SE36-6081. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Tangney, aye. Sampu,
Aye.
Koshulik,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
DeMello,
Aye.
Abadili.
Aye.
That's unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Our next hearing is at 6:30 on June 9th. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Tangney, aye. Sampu,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Koshulik,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
DeMello,
Aye.
Abadili.
Aye.
That's unanimous, Mr. Chair. It's 8:55 p.m.